Every puzzle has an answer.
A few weeks ago, I was paid to create a power scaling video for ReZero. Honestly, this isn't a topic I'm passionate about. We can probably all agree that no one starts watching ReZero to find out who the strongest character is. But hey, money talks, and here I am. In this video, I want to focus on 5 characters who are undeniably powerful, yet also have a human side that makes them intriguing and fascinating to explore in detail, in my opinion. Of course, I know I'll leave out a few other strong contenders, but I'm more inspired to talk about the ones I picked. Welcome to 5 monsters in ReZero who ended up being good guys by accident. Who would have thought that a femboy would make it into this top? Felix may seem kind-hearted in the anime, but if you've read the light novel, you know he's far from all sunshine and rainbows. I won't go into all the details here, but suffice it to say, Felix is that two-faced, toxic teammate who's kind only to his one true friend and puts on a show for everyone else. No matter how much I dislike him, I can't deny that he could turn the whole kingdom upside down, just like Subaru, and probably get away with it, or at least make it extremely hard to stop him. That's all thanks to his magic. On the surface, it's just water magic, mainly used for healing. However, Felix can repurpose it in terrifying ways. For example, he can sabotage a body using the same technique that restores one. In a failed loop, when he needed to stop Subaru, Felix literally shut down his circulatory system. The scariest part? He only needs to touch you once to trigger this anywhere, anytime. Who's going to undo your body's self-destruction when that happens? No one else in the kingdom has that ability. So, if you ever find yourself in this cursed isekai world, avoid touching Felix, no matter how much you love femboys. If you do, you're giving him the perfect excuse to destroy you, or worse, make you his puppet. Okay, that sounded weird. What I meant was, turn you into his puppet. For some reason, when Felix interferes with someone's vital functions, he gains influence over their mind. Imagine this. If Felix snapped, he'd have access to a huge pool of people he's healed. Any one of them could unknowingly become his weapon. He could also take out key figures in the kingdom. He has treated several nobles in the capital, so it's likely that he's healed every knight in the country at least once. What would stop an evil Felix from threatening to kill every knight unless they followed his orders? Or worse, threatening to kill someone they love who he's already treated? Just imagine how much money he could extort by telling a noble he cured that. To stay alive, they need to pay him regularly. With that income, he could easily fund a war effort. Let's not forget, Felix once healed the emperor of a neighboring country. He could start an international conflict by killing the emperor remotely at this point. As if that weren't enough, this dangerous femboy also knows the sacrament of the immortal king, a spell that lets him literally bring the dead back to life. I can totally picture an evil Felix using pawns like disposable chess pieces. Why care if they die when he can just revive them? Thankfully, for now, the only things keeping Felix in check are his mistress, Crush, who lives by strong ideals and inspires him to be honest and righteous, and his mentor, Garrett, who taught him everything he knows and drilled into him the responsibilities of a healer. Given all that, it makes sense why the author once considered making Felix the final boss of ReZero. Perhaps in a parallel universe, Subaru is stuck in loop number 1000, trying to defeat a cat-eared femboy. As I write this, I'm reminded of something else. Felix is on the verge of losing it. Subaru hasn't managed to help Crush, but he did wake Rem up, who was in an even worse state. The audience knows it wasn't Subaru's doing, but given how short-tempered Felix is, I doubt he'll accept that excuse. All I'm saying is that we're close to a canon storyline where Felix becomes a villain. But anyway, let's move on to the next character. I think we can all agree that Wilhelm is extremely strong. After all, he wasn't called the greatest swordsman of his generation for nothing. Even now, in his old age, he's trying to surpass his prime strength. At one point, he was arguably the strongest person of his time, having defeated the most powerful warrior from another kingdom. If we had to compare today's Wilhelm, it would be Marcus. You probably don't remember him because he appeared in the anime but didn't leave much of an impression. However, those of us who read the novels know how important he is to the kingdom of Lagunica's current state. In case you're wondering about his power level, he's considered the second strongest in the kingdom after Reinhard. Then there's Julius, another incredibly skilled fighter. They say that even if he were granted Reinhard's sword Saint Blessing, he wouldn't become any stronger because Julius is already operating at the peak of his swordsmanship. That's just how good he is. I'm pretty confident that Wilhelm, Marcus, and Julius could take down anyone who isn't Reinhard or someone on his level. So imagine my surprise when it's heavily implied in an alternate story that Clind kills all 3 of them. Yes, it's mentioned that Clind struggled to do it, but still, taking out the top 3 warriors in the kingdom at the same time? That's no small feat. Although we don't know all the details of how his power works, we do know how it manifests. Apparently, his abilities revolve around the concepts of dispersion and compression. In one story, Clind attacks a scumbag just by waving his hand. The guy collapses under the crushing weight of gravity, similar to how Hector once attacked Roswal. It's also said that parts of the victim's body disappeared completely, leaving literal voids where flesh used to be. It was as if the man's body had been consumed by holes. Another use of Clind's power is long-distance teleportation. This one's trickier and requires more setup, but it's still an incredible asset, especially for moving an army across great distances. Despite having one of the authorities, Clind isn't evil. This may be because he made a contract with Roswal in the past, agreeing to help the Marquis under certain conditions. Since Roswal's soul is still around in the present timeline, Clind believes he hasn't fulfilled his end of the bargain yet. Another reason he might be on the good side is his connection to Frederica. In one alternate universe, Subaru only defeats Clind by taking Garfield's sister hostage. This shows how much she means to him. Also, fun fact, Clind's attacks are so fast and lethal that it took Subaru from the Greed side story 500 loops to realize Clind was attacking him. I'd love to tell you more about Clind, but honestly, he is one of the most mysterious characters in the series, even in the novels. There are a few interesting tidbits about him, but most of them would be better suited for a lore-focused video than a power-scaling one. I could mention his, well, let's just say his interest in children, or as he puts it, young souls. But I'd rather not risk getting demonetized by YouTube. So, let's move on. Now let's talk about the traitor who recently changed the world of ReZero and its fandom. Aldebaran has always struck me as an intriguing character. When my friends and I read the Pre-Stella arc, we speculated about how mysterious he was. I remember reading that Aldebaran was only slightly stronger than Subaru, so I underestimated his combat ability until I saw him take down top-tier opponents. That's when I realized how foolish I'd been. After all, coming back from the dead and achieving your goals is an extremely powerful way to accomplish your objectives. Aldebaran knows it too. He even says, "I don't mind losing a lot of battles because I only need to win the last one." People tend to forget that the current Aldebaran is stronger than ever thanks to Yin magic, which increases all his stats. Honestly, I'm not surprised by everything he can do now. Add to that the fact that he always has a final move ready for any situation, and it's no wonder he has a counter for every hit he takes. I also love the detail that even though he can redo events, doing so still causes him massive stress and mental exhaustion. There are times he loops just to rest his mind. It's surreal to imagine fighting him and then having him suddenly sit down to rest mid-battle. While that may relieve some stress in the short term, it's not a perfect solution. We see this clearly in his fight against Rom. Al used short loops on purpose to avoid mental fatigue, but it almost led to his defeat. Now he's decided that it doesn't matter if his mental burden increases. He'll stick to longer loops to ensure that he won't get cornered again. Aldebaran flew under the radar for so long, partly because no one expected him to know such powerful magic, especially given his apparent lack of talent for it. It was a huge twist when we learned that he compensates for this by using the most powerful dragon in the world as his intermediary. Thanks to this entity, Aldebaran can cast any elemental magic at its highest level. With fire magic, he can unleash hell on Earth, and with yin magic, he can create something akin to a black hole. But forget those basic spells. The real devastation lies in combined element magic. Take Al-Shario, for example. It appears to be a combination of yin and yang magic. This combination somehow results in a literal meteor shower. Aldebaran's master once used it to wipe out 100 dragons. Aldebaran's threat level doesn't stop there, though. I think he has the potential to elevate the magic he's learned to a whole new level. In the world of ReZero, magic constantly evolves and adapts as civilization progresses. Since Al comes from a more advanced world, he has a very different worldview that lets him see and understand magic in a way no one else in this world can. That's why his power is so terrifying. Currently, his only limit is his imagination. His authority works in two ways. First, he establishes a domain. As long as he dies within that area, he'll rewind time a bit. This version is called the victim. The second version is darker. The person who kills him becomes the one who remembers the loops, but it's pointless because they're doomed to repeat the loop as many times as Al wants. So far, we've seen him use this power to drive people insane. This version of his power is known as the aggressor. However, despite all the praise I can give him, Aldebaran still has weaknesses that can be exploited. For example, people forget that Olbart once completely wiped the floor with him. Sure, Al has come up with some countermeasures since then, but if their first fight had taken place during the start of Aldebaran's rebellion, his betrayal wouldn't have even lasted half a chapter. Old Man Ram even managed to exploit a similar weakness and put Al in check. Now that I think about it, are the older characters in ReZero just absurdly overpowered? Before I forget, the reason Aldebaran didn't go rogue earlier is because of Priscilla. She shone just as brightly as the person Al once tried and failed to save. Priscilla was holding back this side of Aldebaran. Now that she's gone, he's reverted to his old ways, though her death clearly still affects him. Ram figures this out too. He realizes that Aldebaran avoids killing people because he doesn't want anyone else to suffer the same fate as his lost princess. However, setting that aside, the reason I don't rank Aldebaran as the strongest on this list is simple. He has a weakness the next character doesn't. What more can be said about the protagonist? Despite his mistakes and insecurities, he's a great guy who keeps pushing forward. Truthfully, Subaru isn't as strong or as skilled in magic as Aldebaran. However, if he set his mind to it, he could perform the same feats. The only reason he doesn't act like the traitor is because forcing others against their will just isn't his style. Nevertheless, Subaru is ultimately stronger and more capable than Aldebaran. Even the traitor admits it. He says that if they ever fought, he'd lose. So why did he end up sealing Subaru? I'll answer that with another question. If someone disables another from a distance through treachery, can you really call that a fight? Aldebaran knows Subaru is stronger, which is why he refuses to fight him on his own battlefield. The only way he managed to deal with Subaru wasn't even his doing. It came from his master. This person knew about Subaru's existence 400 years ago and made preparations based on that knowledge. The spell that sealed Subaru was one of those preparations, part of a bigger plan to remove Natsuki Subaru from this world. To get back to the point, Subaru is someone who loves and believes in the strength of others, while Aldebaran is more of a loner. He can ask others for help, but he's not the type to inspire many to follow him. Subaru's power isn't just about how much help he can summon, it's also about the range and flexibility of his return point. It's not just about how much time he can rewind, it's also about how large the affected area is. Aldebaran's power is also broken since he can also return from death. However, it has a major flaw. He can't leave the area where his ability was set. Subaru, on the other hand, isn't limited by that restriction. He can go back in time even if he leaves the place where he died. This allows him to consider every variable the world might offer, whereas Aldebaran can only work with those inside his domain. This skill gap becomes more obvious during the Wallachia arc. In that arc, Subaru and Aldebaran team up to face the final enemy. At first, Aldebaran tried to stop her by himself, but he quickly realized that given his limited time to retry, there was nothing he could do. He always lost. So in the end, he just limited himself to sharing the information he had gathered with Subaru. He did so because he knew the protagonist could go further back in time and access variables he couldn't. Another moment that shows Subaru's superiority is when they both fight Olbart. Olbart turned them into children, which disabled Aldebaran's power for some reason. However, Subaru could still use his power, so he was tasked with resolving the situation. Subaru possesses the authority of Sloth, which currently allows him to use invisible arms to attack or pierce objects. Honestly, this authority is kind of boring, mainly because Subaru refuses to embrace the power of that sin. Since he doesn't embody sloth, the power doesn't manifest in extravagant ways. Some say that if he lifted his self-imposed limits, he would be able to make better use of it. For now, it remains an authority with a lot of potential. On the other hand, he has taken a liking to the authority of greed. Subaru's greed stems from his desire to help others. Initially, it only allowed him to take on others' pain while granting them a massive stat boost in return. For example, Ram, who was said to be the second strongest person in the world after Reinhard, regained about 30% of her original strength thanks to this ability. With that power boost, she completely humiliated Lei, the Archbishop of Gluttony. Subaru also uses this ability to distribute and redistribute damage during battle. Once, an ally of his received a fatal wound, but Subaru spread the pain across his team so that the injury would not be lethal. Of course, the fewer people available, the more pain each person takes. But what if Subaru had access to an army? That's exactly what happened in the Wallachia arc, which represents the peak of Subaru's capabilities thus far. In that part of the story, he managed to get a bunch of nobodies to perfectly imitate the mana flow technique. Typically, this technique requires years of training and greatly enhances physical capability. abilities. However, despite having no idea how it worked, Subaru's army managed to replicate it thanks to his authority. Additionally, all damage was spread across nearly 800 members of his faction. The wildest part? Subaru created a spell that not even Echidna could pull off in the past. While Aldebaran relies on techniques passed down from his master, Subaru crafts spells from scratch. Score 1 more for the original failure. Fun fact, apparently his army never sustained any real damage. There's no mention of injuries in the narrative. How do you hurt someone whose senses are sharpened and whose body is hardened by that spell? I don't know if it technically counts as one of Subaru's techniques, but he also currently has the abilities of a Gluttony Archbishop, which are massively boosted by his greed authority. Subaru, with the Gluttony Archbishop on his side, is way stronger than Aldebaran, who at this point has the remaining Gluttony Archbishop with him. But unlike Rui Arneb, this one hasn't even had their abilities enhanced. It's poetic how the protagonist redeemed an Archbishop while the other guy drags his further into the mud. All of that is just about Subaru's authorities. He has some physical capabilities, but honestly, they're not worth mentioning. They're nothing special by this world's standards. We could discuss his leadership and strategy skills, but I won't delve too deeply into them. Ultimately, he can only make smart choices thanks to his powers. The important thing is that Subaru always wins against Aldebaran, but not against the next person on the list. Thank goodness Subaru loves Emilia in a healthy way. If his love were as toxic as in those other stories, the kingdom would have gone straight to hell by now. To close the video, we have the strongest character in ReZero, without a doubt, who doesn't even have parents, Reinhard. What more can be said about him? He's strong on rainy days, sunny days, and cloudy days. Whether there are many clouds or just a few, he's strong under pretty much any condition you can think of. He can instantly master any bladed weapon he sees for the first time. But honestly, who cares? When his fists alone are enough to wipe out the entire universe in this series. We could talk about how he grows stronger when slightly hurt or when wielding a sword capable of destroying black holes, but that pales in comparison to his ability to come back to life as many times as he wants, even if you manage to kill him. His strength is said to be so absurd that not even the most powerful version of Subaru from an alternate storyline, the one from the greed route, could deal with him. If that Subaru couldn't figure it out, then Aldebaran definitely stands no chance. In fact, it has already happened. Honestly, I'd love to discuss Reinhard's overpowered abilities in more detail, but it's not a topic that excites me. I think there are already plenty of videos on this platform that do a better job of explaining just how ridiculous his power is. I find Reinhard more interesting because of his role in the lore than because of how overpowered he is. To wrap up the video, I'll share a few of his feats from the story. One time, on a rainy day, Lady Felt asked him to deliver a letter without letting a single drop of water touch it, and he did it. Another time, he was taught the basics of swordsmanship, and during his very first lesson at the age of 5, he managed to defeat his own father, a man who had dedicated his entire life to the sword. Once, an alternate version of Subaru asked Reinhard for help with the white whale, one of the most powerful magical beasts in ReZero. Canonically, it took a huge alliance to bring that thing down, but Reinhard, he took care of it with just his bare hands. Then there was that time when Reinhard talked to Subaru and told him he already knew about his return by death ability. He said that because